Victim of this Liberal NDP Prime Minister has come forward. This time, it's his own parliamentary budgeting officer who revealed yesterday that there's a secret government document that would lambaste and completely put to shame the claims on the carbon tax scam. Will this Liberal NDP Prime Minister lift the gag order on the PBO?
There is someone who is being gagged, and that is an MP who sits in this House of Commons. He had the temerity to say out loud what the majority of Conservative MPs believe, which is that a woman should not have the right to choose.
Debate in the House of Commons today after the parliamentary budget officer told a House committee the government will not let him share all of the data they've used to calculate what Canadians will get, or what the economic impact, rather, of the carbon tax is. Let's talk more about all of this with the front bench. They're back. Brian Gallant, James Moore, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie. Brian, I certainly would not purport that Canadians are glued to the saga of the PBO at this moment, but on the wider question of whether the government should show its math, like, why wouldn't, if they felt the numbers backed up their argument that they've continually been making around the lack of an impact overall on the economy, just that Canadians are getting more back, like, why wouldn't they produce that data?
Yeah, I mean, top answer is, yeah, probably they could. It would be helpful, certainly, given the political debate. There is, I mean, some valid points when it comes to sort of sharing briefing notes, because then I think on every topic that ever will come up in the media and that becomes a political question, they'll say, well, share your notes, share your briefings. And that's just not how a government, how a cabinet works. So you do it once, it's certainly a precedent, and then it will become a thing where you won't want to do it all the time because it's improper to do so. And then the civil service won't feel free to provide advice, knowing that this will basically essentially become a press release. So I do worry about the precedent it costs. But to the top line answer, yeah, you're right to say that if they have numbers and data that would be able to prove their point, especially on this very hot topic, it would make sense to do so. I do find the back and forth with the PBO a bit painful to watch. I mean, I think the PBO has certainly made a pretty big blunder in the mistake that they made. Whether it's going to change the numbers a lot or not, it has now cast doubt not only on the policy without actually having the real numbers, but then it also cast doubt on their ability, and it just undermines just sort of everything that and the important institution that the PBO is. And on top of that, the idea of putting it out, the correction out, and not telling anybody for weeks and watching the political debate just unfold, and this be one of the major topics, if not the major topic, that the sort of Conservatives and Liberals are debating. So I find that pretty shocking. And now for them to kind of say, oh, there's a gag order, I think that's a bit excessive. It's a briefing note. It's data that government would have that you don't share. It's just things that you don't share. But top line answer, you probably could, given the importance of the topic.
James, what do you think about the sheer politics of this? Because I do understand the Liberals pushing back on the math, particularly for what Brian just laid out. But I'm also, at the same time, perplexed at the desire they have to talk about this subject at all, given what's happened over the last 10 months to their polling numbers, and this issue's tie into that.
Well, if anybody's wondering what sort of the last life of a government looks like as it's sort of spiraling 20 points behind in the polls, this is what it looks like, right? You have 3 of 3 reports have come into the government showing foreign interference, and now there's some members of parliament who are apparently wittingly involved in this, and the government doesn't take action. Then you have the parliamentary budget officer puts out numbers, then pulls them back, then kind of puts them out again, and then it goes sideways. And then the parliamentary budget officer, who's an officer of parliament, who's not an agent of the government, an officer of parliament, goes before a committee and says, well, I would like to provide you some of that data, and we wanted to collect more data from the government, but the government wouldn't give us the data that we were looking for. Then an opposition party, the official opposition, says to the government, why are you hiding this information? Show us the information. And the government's response is, let's talk about abortion. I mean, if that doesn't tell you the status of this government in terms of how it's lost control of the narrative, lost control of its ability to even thoughtfully try to spin its way towards a more reasonable approach to governing the country, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, this is really sad, and Minister Freeland is better than this. She should be better than this.
Tom, what do you think about that?
I think that we should have a parliamentary budget office. We've put too much emphasis on the officer. Kevin Page was the first one. Wonderful character, larger-than-life figure, did great work, but became a personality. And if you go to the United States, for over 100 years, Congress has had a government oversight agency, the General Accounting Office. You don't know the name of the officer. It's a managing director. His name is J. Christopher Meme. Most people in Congress have never heard of him because he's not a public figure. And so Yves Giroux is becoming a public figure. He's involved in, well, why didn't he let us know? This was a big public debate. Why didn't he let us know he had flubbed a major part of his report? And yes, the wheels come off. When all of a sudden you wind up having the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister who somehow manages to seg into the question of a woman's right to choose on this, yes, it is end of regime. That's what we're going through right now in Ottawa. But I get back to the initial point. If we want to save this important parliamentary institution, let's depersonalize it. Let's bring in the type of professional that nobody's going to question, bring out their reports. Let's not make it about an individual who sometimes seems to appear to believe that they're there as an alternate opposition force. Bring in somebody who's just capable of managing the thing properly. This was badly managed. It was lousy staff work, and Giroux should have admitted it right away. And because it was a big thing, they hadn't included, they had mistakenly included the numbers for the industrial portion of the carbon tax with the individual stuff. It was a shambles. So I think that that's part of the solution here because it is institutional. The Liberals are right to be very upset with Giroux, because I don't think he was playing transparency. And if his job is to force other people to be transparent, he's got to preach by example.
Do you think, Rob, their consternation over this is punching through to Canadians writ large?
No, I don't believe that for a second, Vassy. I think people have made up their minds on the carbon tax. Some people like it. Most people apparently don't like it, according to polls. I guess more people like it, though, than like the government of the day. So that's an odd kind of thing that's happening. But I think Tom nailed something very important there, Vassy. People in the media like myself are as much to blame for this as anyone. We have lionized and deified these officers of Parliament, officers of the legislature here at Queen's Park, and we make them out to be sages and who cannot be fallible, and that's just ridiculous. They shouldn't be personalities. It should be the office. Giroux's office should be embarrassed by that screw up with the math. That's embarrassing, and I don't blame the Grits for punching through. That's what I would do on this. Although no one is really paying attention because, as I say, Vassy, people have made up their mind on the carbon tax when they fill up their cars or go to the grocery store, and I think that's why. If I were the Conservatives, I would continue to talk about the carbon tax all the time because it's a winning issue from. When they're talking about social issues, not so great, as we saw from the podcast, the Nate Erskine-Smith podcast and that whole debacle. I mean, that's why Chrystia Freeland was dropping the A-bomb, abortion.
Yeah, we talked about that one at length yesterday, I promise. I got to leave our conversation there. Thank you so much, Brian Gallant, James Moore, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie, our front bench, our takeaway.